Hello, everyone. I'm Julianne Meyer. You are watching Own Your Wellness, and I'm excited to be here today, as always. But today is the show that almost didn't happen because of internet and all these other really fun little details that are, all the back end technology things that can sometimes go haywire when you're trying to do something live. But hey, that's what makes it part of the fun, right? It's called live television. So anyway, enough about that. I'm really excited about today's guest. He's absolutely fascinating. I know that you guys are going to find him fascinating as well. Plus, his wife has the same name as me, so that's kind of cool too. Anyway, without further ado, let me introduce you to Ian Williams. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, Julianne. Appreciate it.
I'm so glad you're here. As I mentioned, it was like one of those things where my internet was down. You almost couldn't find a place. And here we are, champions.
We made it. The world continues to turn.
Yeah, screeching in. But anyway, let's just jump right in. I'd love for you to share a bit about yourself and your own wellness journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Ian Williams, author, speaker, and business advisor are the short, silly taglines, right? When we condense ourselves into three little words or phrases. So I recently published a book entitled Soil and Spirit, launched February 21st of this year. That's my first published book. I'm also a speaker, have a background in education, so very comfortable in front of audiences, organizations, etc. And then a strategic advisor. So I work with organizations, particularly on business process development, employee well-being, and social and environmental impact. So a lot to chew there in terms of what I do with organizations, but really it's kind of central to all of my work as a professional. I just try and take a holistic approach. And I would say the same is true for my own personal health and wellness journey. I think it started in earnest probably about a decade ago. I can really pinpoint the exact date, and I'm sure we'll get there. But I just had some major changes in my life, and said this is a time for me to really dive deep and start to try and learn and discover why I've got this underlying depression and anxiety, why I'm struggling with mental health issues, and learn to just take it a little bit more seriously, but also be a little bit more joyful along the way. So my health and wellness journey really started in earnest about a decade ago. It's covered everything from nutrition to physical fitness, but it really kind of found its home when I found the energy arts. So yoga, qigong, tai chi, meditation, those things are really continue to be central to my practice and my health and well-being.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because a lot of people, and here's the thing, even in the tagline of the show, there's more to health and wellness than broccoli and burpees. There's so much more to it than, what you eat in your mouth and you have how you move your body. Everything's energy. So I really like it when my guests have experienced that and made some major changes in their lives. So you mentioned that there was a turning point, like a day. So I'd love for you to share about that.
Yeah, for sure. We can dive in, but I'll back up a little bit further just for context for the audience. At this point in my life, so when this day happened, I was probably 10 years into substance use and abuse. So it was really using substances as a way to mask that underlying depression and anxiety that I mentioned earlier. And was just, kind of through and through an addict, right? It was like anything that came across my plate, I would put into my body. Really looking for escapism and really just looking to try and experience something else with life. Now that I look back on it, right? Just trying to experience something more, a little bit more full. So I have this background in addiction, still have addictive tendencies, and continue to, deal with the compulsive urges that create those addictive tendencies. But I inherited a dog, and she was the love of my life for about 6 years. But she was a little unstable, and by a little I mean a lot. She was just intense. Like her love was intense. Everything about her was intense. And over those 6 years, there was a number of dog fights, dog bites, people bites. It was high maintenance. And at that time in my life, still in the throes of my addiction, still in the throes of my mental and emotional challenges, really kind of like the heart of them, I just simply wasn't responsible enough to take care of her. That's not to say that we didn't try. And I say we because it was also my family. We did everything from, training, one-on-one classes, doggy medication, like psych evaluations I didn't even know were possible for dogs at the University of Minnesota. Like we went all in because we were a dog family and we really cared. And to make a very long story short, we essentially were told by this kind of psych evaluative doc at the University of Minnesota. She said it without saying it. She said, I'd put this dog down. So we made a very difficult decision to do that. It happened until I didn't really fully make that decision, probably until almost a year and a half later. I was living with a buddy, and the kind of final all-out battle royale happened in the hallway in terms of a dog fight. And I was up 15 minutes with a bunch of other people from our apartment building trying to break it up. We finally did. I got her back into my apartment, and she just looked at me and like, it's hard to explain what she communicated through her eyes. But I'm looking at her and she's got blood on her face and I've got blood on my hands. And she looks at me and it was just like, the past is in the past. What do you want to do now? And she was happy and she was excited and she was present. And in that moment, I just had this vision and this clarity of like, I can't do this anymore. I don't have the skill set to really give her what she needs. So it was in that moment that I finally made the decision to let her go. And this was, I think, November. We let her go December 30th of 2013. So I gave myself 2 months to soak up as much as I could. And for anybody who's got any experience with addiction and substance use, at least one of the ways that it manifested for me is I just kind of stopped dreaming. But as soon as we let her go, my dreams just picked up and everything went off the charts. And particularly in that first week after the fact. So I'm laying in bed one night, I'm awake. And this is like 4 or 5 days after we let her go, took her to the vet for the last time. And I felt her nudge the door open and like I could feel her energy and presence walk into the room, and she hopped up on the bed next to me. And I turned and I looked at her and I could see her and I could hear her, but she didn't make an imprint on the mattress. And it was so soon after we let her go that I didn't think anything of it, right? I mean, it's the middle of the night. I'm already kind of discombobulated. So I just rolled over and I faced her, and she curled up next to me and she let out that patented sigh, which she always did when it was time to get under the covers. And I fell asleep instantly. And I was using journaling and still do as a means of emotional processing. And I woke up the next morning and I was writing about the experience, thinking it was a dream because my dreams had just kind of gone crazy in the last couple of days. And it wasn't until like 10 minutes into that writing session where I realized, like, excuse my friends, but holy shit, I was awake when that happened. And I have no way to wrap any sort of understanding around that experience. I mean, it just completely shattered my conception of what reality was. And that was a turning point for me, undoubtedly. I mean, it was this mystical, profound experience that I still can't really wrap words around, right? But at the time, one of the things that I took away from it was, I need to figure this out, right? I need to go like do a deep dive on this spirituality stuff, which I think is a little naive now looking back at it. But that was the turning point, right? I mean, it was this notion that my world was truly turned upside down through this profound and mystical experience. And that began the journey of, really like deep, honest self-assessment and well-being.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I feel like crying now. I grew up in a family of animal rights activists and, animal savers. And so they do a lot of, my parents do a lot of hospice and a lot of, just taking care of animals for short terms, while they find homes and things like that. And, we've actually had to put down a few animals because they were never going to be, like they might hurt somebody, I mean, it really turned into, it could be extremely dangerous and we'd have to put them down anyway. And so but to be that attached and to have to make that choice is so brutal. I'm just so glad though, that your dog came to see you after that. I was like, it's okay. We're all good.
It was almost like, as I reflected on it, it was almost like when she laid down and she curled up and she sighed, it was like her giving me permission to let go, right? I mean, that's kind of one of the ways that I have internalized that experience, or did at the time at least. And that permission to let go gave me the permission to move forward, right? Because I was riddled with guilt and shame and grief And for anybody who's experienced loss in any real capacity, I mean, you know that those things can be crippling, on top of the addiction and mental health stuff that I was already dealing with at the time. And so it was just this pivotal moment that catapulted me in a different direction. And still to this day, right? We're coming up on, it's 2023, so we're coming up on a full decade this year. There's so much in my life that I still attribute, and dedicate to her, like almost living in her honor, in the sense of she gave me this gift, right? I mean, her departure was a gift, and it was really hard to see that at the time, but it's certainly one of the ways that our relationship has changed and it manifested over the years.
Yes. I had a cat that was the love of my life, and he was in his 20s when he passed away. But I'll never forget this one time he had a stroke or something like that, and he couldn't hardly even walk. And so I decided I was going to put him down, and I remember putting him on my bed, so I was looking at him eye to eye, and I was basically saying goodbye to him, because there's no way I was going to let my baby, be in that much pain where he couldn't even walk without hurting desperately. So he just looked me in the eyes, and he just got like, I mean, I understand when you said that moment of presence, like it was just one of those things where it was like he understood me. And I swear to God, the next day he was perfectly fine. He lived another like 8 years after that, no problems, basically.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it brings us to like just the relationship with a pet, right? I think it brings us to this conversation, to back to your point about health and well-being is more than broccoli and burpees. Like it's more than just the body, right?
Is.
And there's something that I feel like is an easy way to contextualize it. This notion that's borrowed from yogic culture, this notion of the 5 koshas, right? There's different layers to the body: physical, mental, emotional, the subtle energies, and then there's a 5th, which is more etheric. But that's really how I've come to think about it, right? Because a relationship with a pet, for example, you're not communicating with that animal all the time. At least you're not communicating with them conceptually or verbally, right? It's not just an intellectual relationship, it's an experiential relationship.
Yeah.
And it incorporates and integrates the whole self of both entities. And that is something that I think I really needed those tools, right? So I said the energy arts have been an integral part of my healing and continue to be an integral part of my well-being. Moving into those spaces and learning how to be in my body, which is something I didn't know how to do at that time in my life. And then learning how to like safely explore the subtle nuances of the different layers of the body, right? Physically, mentally, emotionally, and then starting to have some sort of grasp or understanding of those subtle energies. It changes the way you see and perceive the world, right? I mean, I think we're so conditioned, particularly in Western culture, to just walk around and like everything is intellectual, everything is conceptual. And that is only one lane, it's only one avenue, one dimension of life. So I feel like we're really limiting ourselves, particularly our health and well-being, if we choose to kind of stay locked in that space.
No, that's a wonderful way to put it. I couldn't agree with you more. Besides, if you want to get really sciencey, you could just go back to energy, and nothing is created nor destroyed. So, even, and even our thoughts are energy, everything. So you can't necessarily see all of that. So, it is very limiting. It makes me think about blood, for example, when they couldn't figure out what people were dying in the hospital, and the guy figured out it was blood, and they called him insane. And, that they were passing it along to, because they didn't clean up between patients and stuff. Yeah, there's things we just can't see. So I love that. So, you've been on this journey of wellness for quite some time, and, you've written a book that is absolutely fascinating. And I want to talk about that in just a little bit. But that seems to me like wellness also, it's just encompassing more, more concepts besides, if we are energy and we're all connected, it would make sense that you would want to take care of things outside of what's inside the meat suit.
Well said.
Yeah. What inspired you to write it?
Other people. So, the dog experience led to this chapter of deep self-discovery and exploration, and a lot of self-reflection. And I use that term loosely, right? Because I think, again, it can have the connotation of intellectual reflection, and there was plenty of that, but it was this introspective process. And through that process of going inward, I started to learn a whole bunch about myself, and I started to understand some of the natural truths in the world, right? Like one of my favorites is, if you look out in nature, diversity is what creates resilience. And I had created a pretty monolithic life, right? It was like, wake up, get high, eat, sleep, work, repeat. And it was just a number of people over the years asking me, how did you learn that about yourself? Where did that come from? Where did you read that? And it was always, I didn't. It just kind of came out of me. It was just me and my own self-reflection and introspective process. And I just heard a number of people over the years say, you got to get that message out in the world. You got to put it in a book, or you got to put it online, or you got to do whatever. And it was always kind of one of those things, you got your own self-doubt and your mental blocks that you're playing with. And I was like, okay, right? Like, doesn't everybody think this way? And to fast forward, make a long story short, I decided I was going to go back to grad school, and I knew that I was going back in order to put a lot of grist through the mill in terms of what is this business that I need to start about? Right? I guess I had already technically started it, but it was like, I need it to take shape, and I need a learning space to hold me accountable to doing that, because I can get lost in my own thoughts. So when I went back to school, I hired a business coach, and he challenged me. He said, let's just pretend that we're only going to work together for 90 days. Like, what's the biggest risk you can take? What's the biggest goal you could set? What's the biggest challenge you could give yourself in these 90 days? And I said, it's writing a book. It's finally writing that book that other people have told me to write for years. So the first draft, at least, was done in 90 days. But it was really other people, I never really had any intentions or dreams of writing a book. It was just accepting that feedback, and hearing that message and saying, okay, apparently there is something to offer here. Let me take responsibility for that and craft this message in such a way that I can get it out into the world in an accessible way.
I love that. All right, so we do have to go to a commercial break real quick. We're going to be back in just a minute. When we come back from commercial, we're going to talk about the book and, just dig a little deeper, if I can speak, use my words. And for everybody who's watching us live, I do want to say hello to you, and we will be back in just a minute. Welcome back, everyone. If you're just joining us now, I am Julianne Meyer, and our guest today is Ian Williams. Welcome back to the show. So glad to have you here today. For those of you who are watching, I did a little bit of internet stalking, and that's how I found Ian. And I was just blown away, even by your website, just who you are and what you offer the world. And I just knew that you were somebody that I really thought, I would love to have on the show because you have so much to offer the world. And if we can put you in front of more people, then the better off they are too. So thank you again for being here today. I'm so glad to have you here. And, I really want to dive into the book. Where can people find it? All the details, tell us more about it, all the things.
Yeah. So remind me to circle back to this at the end. If people want to find it, they can either go to my website, which will link you to Amazon. You can find it on any online major retailer, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, etc. Or if you want to just go straight to my website and sign up for the newsletter, that'll work too. If you want a free sample, go to the website, sign up for the newsletter, you'll get a free sample. The book is entitled Soil and Spirit, Seeds of Purpose, Nature's Insight, and the Deep Work of Transformational Change. The first question most people have is like, tell me about the title, Soil and Spirit. What do you mean? It's really meant to be metaphorical on a couple different levels. One is this notion that there's a soil, a substrate, a foundation to spirituality. And I try and speak to that foundation or that soil in the book. The other is a direct nod to the environment. I'm very passionate about climate change, and I'm very passionate about social justice. And these two things go hand in hand, right? They're two wings of the same bird, two sides of the same coin. And collectively, we have some work to do environmentally. So it's also a commentary. The book is also a commentary about not just why we should do our own inner work, our own self-cultivation and development, but why that work is important in the face of planetary well-being. So that's really what the title is about, right? And then Seeds of Purpose, Nature's Insight, the Deep Work of Transformational Change. This idea that first and foremost, it's built upon this foundational truth that the only way out is in. And what I mean by that, right? There's a quote attributed to Buddha: "Pain is inevitable, suffering is optional." Right? We all suffer, and it's optional. And the way to move through that suffering, the way to get out of that suffering, is actually to turn inward. So these seeds of purpose, when we turn inward, we can find that purpose, right? And we can allow those seeds to germinate. Nature's insight is this hint towards we exist within the bounds of natural law, right? We are of nature. We live in this planet. We don't live on this planet. And Mother Earth has a whole lot to teach us about how to live a truly sustainable life. And of course, the deep work of transformational change. This idea that the greatest gift that you can give the earth is actually saving yourself. Being selfish about your own self-realization will create selflessness to go be of service in the world. So it's a big title. It's a big idea book, right? I mean, it's not for the person who just wants to breeze through in an afternoon. It is not a self-help book. It is not a sales book. It's a big idea book for people who are really invested and committed to their own process of transformational change. In terms of how it's structured, we can go into a little bit about that. I tried to be as concrete and sequential as I could be, tried to be as linear as I could be. So the book has four main sections: the internal landscape, social landscape, external landscape, spiritual landscape. And each one of these landscapes or sections is broken up into small, I promise, bite-sized chapters or passages, because I love reading these books myself, but sometimes they can just, like, when a chapter is 50 pages long, it's like, when am I going to be done? So the reason it's structured this way, though, is because I'm really, again, trying to provide some sort of linear path to take the reader on. The idea is the internal landscape is we're starting inward. We're starting with the internal. And what we're doing in the internal is going to impact the social landscape around us. Of course, as individuals and as a collective, we're impacting the external landscape, the physical world, and then ultimately the spiritual landscape, right? Like this binding agent that ties it all together. So that's the structure of the book. Again, it's a big idea book written for people who are interested in, diving deep, and whether they want to learn more about themselves or whether they feel like they know a lot about themselves, but they want to find their place in terms of their service and, purpose in the world. That's really who it's written for. People who are taking this stuff seriously, but also are looking for a little bit of grist to send through the mill in terms of like where to go next. Where is this next thing going to spit me out? So how do I take the leap and take the next step and move forward? So we could certainly dive deeper into the book if you want to, but it's the quintessential. I think the visual to communicate is like the stone dropped in the pond creates that ripple effect. I'm really trying to illustrate, not just intellectually, but also experientially for the reader, how going inward and committing to self-discovery and cultivation is going to create those outward ripples, and why we have to hold ourselves responsible and accountable to that work. It's our responsibility to do this work in ourselves in order to make the world a better place. We can't just keep pointing fingers and hope that other people or organizations or agencies are going to solve our problems for us.
Something that really sticks in my mind, a few different things, but the main thing is I read somewhere a long time ago about when you make a healthy change in your life for you, it does have that healthy ripple effect out for people. So let's say I was a smoker and I decided to stop smoking. Me quitting smoking would have this health ripple for people out, like 6 degrees of separation is like 4 degrees of separation, but with health. And I just thought that that was such a fun way of just being.
Yeah.
Like if I'm just being me, then I'm actually making a contribution by helping myself. So I love this idea too, that, it's like you can't pour from an empty cup. So you got to take care of who you are and, what you're up to as well. It's beautiful. And, also when I think when you, and correct me if I'm wrong, this has been my experience. You don't know this, but I have my own addiction story. And, at first it was, and especially when I was in the height of my addiction, it was me, 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 all me. And how am I going to get my drug of choice? And how am I getting, and it was all of how everything, my brother died literally. And it was poor me, not his family or my dad or anybody else, but poor me. And, it's like when I started to get healthier, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, all the things, all of a sudden that was not as fulfilling. I needed to, make more of a difference for other people as well. It just naturally came. It was not something I forced. Was that your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're speaking to a really important truth in all of this, is that where is the motivation coming from? Right? I mean, I was an addict for 12 years. And what I tell people is for the last 10 and a half years, I knew I didn't want to be using. I couldn't stop. I went to bed every night saying tomorrow's going to be the day. And after you lie to yourself for a full decade, there's a lot of doubt, right? And then it all, and you could even still say in my story, right, with Trina and letting her go, that it was still an external motivator. But at the time, it was the only thing I could cling to, because I didn't have that internal sense of regulation or that internal locus of control. But I completely agree with you in that going inward and focusing on yourself has that outward impact, right? I mean, I had people, so I'm 7.5 years in recovery right now, or sober. I'm not necessarily super fond of the term in recovery. And, people come up to me like, oh, I wish I could get sober. And I just have to look them dead in the eye and say, you can. But there's nothing that's going to allow you to escape the challenging components of doing the work in order to earn that outcome. Right. Yeah. I mean, again, you have to go through it. You can't go around it, above it, below it. You have to go through it. Now that doesn't mean that it has to be this, excruciatingly uncomfortable process. Parts of it may be, but with real diligence, and understanding and awareness and learning around self-acceptance and self-compassion, and two things that I was completely absent of and in many ways still am. I think those things can really help you move through it, right? And creating that space. But it ultimately, again, going back to the motivation, I think also leads to a greater truth, which is, you said you can't pour from an empty cup, right? To be of service in the world, to live a fully fledged life as an individual, but then to also have the greatest impact that you can have outwardly, requires a commitment to that process of self-awareness and discovery. And I, particularly in the wellness industry, I feel like there's it's easy to sell it as a bed of rose petals, right? But you're going to focus on your health and well-being, and life's going to get better, and it's only going to get better from there. But the reality is, the wellness journey is like walking through a rose garden, right? It smells wonderful, it looks beautiful, and you're going to get cut up along the way because those bushes have thorns. And it's all part of the experience, right? And it's not about avoiding the bad to cling to the good. It's about embracing a more holistic understanding and awareness of life that allows us to accept the cuts, bumps, and bruises along the way, knowing that they're creating some sort of transformational change within us.
Yeah, that's, I love that, because I know for me, when I first got clean and sober, it was, I didn't even know who I was anymore at that point. And it was not pleasant. I mean, it was better. It was way better, but it was not good. It was like, now I have to look at all the things that I was using, to, like, I was trying to avoid by using, and I have to do it while I'm sober. So it's like, now I have to do this. I actually, like you said, I have to go through it. I have to go inwards. I have to just deal with all that stuff that I was avoiding for so long, and I have to do it sober.
I and this is the dead honest truth. I spent more money on kombucha and chocolate than I ever did on drugs and alcohol in those first like 3 to 6 months, because I just said to myself, I'll consume whatever I need to in order to not use substances, right? These substances. Legit, I spent way more money on kombucha and alcohol. I mean, it was every day, right?
That is so funny. Yeah, I get that. I'll just, for me, it was, and by the way, I don't like the term in recovery either. I use it because that's how people can understand what I'm saying, but it implies that something is broken.
Yeah. And the same thing for I'm clean, right? Implies that we used to be dirty.
Yes, exactly.
And there's so much, again, to go back to, like, particularly in the Western world, how the intellect governs the way that we see and perceive the world. The language that we use is huge.
Yeah.
Right. And that self-talk creates our reality, but it's not necessarily reality, right? In fact, it's probably not reality. So it's just it's like a healthy distancing from those things, right? And that's what the energy arts allowed for me, right? The ability to kind of have that meta perspective of, this is what's happening in my life. These are the compulsive tendencies that are playing out, the interactions that I'm having, the discomfort that I'm experiencing. But I don't need to identify with it in such a way that I'm taking it on and it's spinning me into my own compulsive patterns, right? Like, there's that healthy space or distance, detachment to the process. And I think that's a cornerstone of awareness.
It makes me think of the idea of the broken arm. It's like, I have a broken arm. I am not a broken arm. It's a part of the experience. It is what it is, but that's not me.
Yeah, 100%.
I love that one. That's when people are always talking about, I'm angry or I'm sad, I'm just like, why are you owning it? I mean, I get really into the way I speak to myself and to others. So it bothers me, but at the same time, for people to understand what the message I'm trying to get them to hear, then sometimes, you just have to say it in a different language than you might necessarily choose for yourself.
Yeah.
So how long did it take you? I mean, I know that coming back to your book and language and
Mm,
words, I know that the first draft took you 90 days, which is phenomenal. But how long did it take to get from that to where you are now, where people can go
yeah,
out and buy it?
2.5 years.
Okay.
Um, and there's reasons for that. I was in grad school at the same time. I was at least for the first year, I was still working full time, like a
Hmm.
W-2 job, and then I was consulting part time as well. So there
Yeah.
was a lot on my plate during those couple of years. But um, the reality is, when you take on a project like this, what I couldn't have anticipated at the beginning, or couldn't have known or sensed to the extent that I would have experienced it, is the way that book writing process would have changed me.
Hmm.
You know, and where I'm at now, just in terms of my own life experience and growth and development, is that decade of immersion and self-discovery was largely an inward journey.
Hmm.
And so I got really comfortable with emotional vulnerability, but it also gave me the privilege to only share that process with people I was comfortable with,
Hmm.
right? People that I felt safe to share that process with. Now my work in the next chapter is about sharing it outwardly. And that's a whole different ball of wax, because I'm putting it in front of people, like this audience, and I don't know who they
Hmm.
are and I don't know how they'll receive it. But I still need to put it out there, right?
Yeah.
So the book, from, the day that it started, the day it began, until the day that it was published, was a 2.5 year saga. Multiple rounds of editing, of course, naturally, right?
Hmm.
But to get to the point where you're going through, I think the final book is like 36,000 words. I promise it sounds like a lot, but it's not a big book.
No.
To get to the point where you're going through line by line and you're
Yeah.
selecting word by word, for me, it was something I had to take 100% all the way to the finish line. At any point in the process, I could have said, it's done, it's good enough.
Hmm.
But there was just this awareness within me of, I can't say that about this project, right? And in many ways, it was like, I've committed to my sobriety 100%, but
Hmm.
this was almost the first outward project, professional production project that I committed to 100%. So I took my time and I was very
Hmm.
intentional. And I'm actually very glad that I did, because in those 2.5 years, there was a lot of personal growth and change. And
Hmm.
so there were whole sections of the book that came out, and there were new sections that went in, and there was a whole bunch of the content and sentences that were restructured and reworded in order to try and convey, again, experientially for the reader, not just conceptually,
Hmm.
exactly the point that I'm trying to drive home. So in total, it was 2.5 years.
You know what? I think that that's beautiful. I love that you were that committed to it. And, I'm like you. I just recently made that commitment to something outside of myself. Now that I'm sober, it took me almost 10 years to get there. So, um, it's absolutely fascinating what you can accomplish and who you become. That's the thing that you said that I really want to focus on, who you become while you're doing these things, because that's the experience of life. But anyway, we do need to go to one more commercial break, so we're going to be back in just a minute. And I already said hello to everybody who's watching us live. Hello to everybody who is watching us on demand. So glad that you're here as well. We do need to go to a commercial break. When we come back, we're going to explore the idea of, really committing to something, as well as who you become in the process, and all these fun things that might help you with your big goals in life. We'll be back in just a minute.
When drug or alcohol addiction take over, things begin to disappear. Your friends, your family, and eventually, you. Recommended by Dr. Phil, New Method Wellness can help get your life back with individualized treatment plans for dual diagnosis clients. New Method Wellness provides the most highly credentialed treatment in a safe and welcome environment. Call New Method Wellness for your free consultation and ask about our national accreditations. Together, we can put the pieces back together.
Welcome to E360 TV, the live streaming and on-demand destination for influential voices and enlightened audiences. We offer trending, grassroots, and purpose-driven content across a diverse range of interests. E360 TV is more than just watching programs. We offer the ability to interact with live shows connecting audiences to real, authentic influencers and storytellers while streaming to millions of devices. Real experiences. Raw conversations. One destination for it all. E360 TV.
Welcome back, everyone. I just made a discovery. My phone has not been on silent this entire time. So thank goodness nobody wanted to talk to me, except for maybe our guest today. So let's bring him on. Ian Williams, welcome back to the show. I'm just like, oh my gosh. I never have my phone off silent, so it was really odd that it was on. Anyway, enough about that. You touched on some beautiful things that I really want to kind of unpack a little bit. We don't have a lot of time left, but the who you become in the process part. So many people are so busy trying to get somewhere, do something like some sort of goal, and like the point is the goal, and they miss the whole point of the journey. And I somebody said this to me not that long ago, and it really resonated with me. And it was that if you're not happy on the way there, how do you expect to be happy when you get there? And I thought that was really fascinating, because it might give you a quick, jolt of excitement, but then it fades out really quick if you don't focus on who you get to be during that entire process. So I'm curious, this is like a whole other level of vulnerability that you are experiencing now. And is it scary for you? Is it exciting, thrilling? I mean, what's it like to move into this phase?
Yeah, it's all those things. Terrifying, exciting, thrilling. It's a real growth zone, right? I mean, I'm on a learning edge, and quite honestly, this is where I love to be in life. Mm-hmm. I really enjoy these spaces because it makes me, the intensity of it, for lack of a better term, makes me feel really close to the process and the experience. Mm-hmm. So, I certainly wouldn't ask for anything else, but yeah, it's terrifying enough. And I, to your point about, my wife has this wonderful necklace, the joy is in the journey, right? To your point. And the goal outcome stuff is, keep in mind, when I'm working with organizations, I'm deep in that space, mm-hmm. right? Because it's got to be tangible and tactical from an organizational standpoint, at least from a business process standpoint. Mm-hmm. We could, maybe it might get a little softer if we start talking about employee well-being and engagement. But one thing that I often share with people as a simple thought exercise to try and just, again, put a little distance in between themselves and their thought processes is this notion of, okay, well, when I get X, then I'll feel Y. And what I encourage people to reflect on is think back, use your memory, think into the past about a time where you said, if I get X, I'll feel Y. when that actually happened. And it's not to diminish the feeling at all, right?
Mhm.
Feel the joy or whatever positive emotions you felt. But my question is, have you been able to sustain it every moment henceforth?
Mhm.
And if the answer to that question is yes, then I want to talk to you because you know something I don't. But more than likely, if the answer to that question is no, that's an opportunity to see a deeper truth,
Mhm.
right? This idea that the production consumption hamster wheel, and I don't just mean consuming products and physical things. I mean like the consumption of experiences in a compulsive state,
Mhm.
right? That's ultimately not fulfilling. It's pointing you to a deeper truth in your life, which is that there's a more existential truth that you've just yet to really awaken or uncover or fully integrate into your life. And most of us have touched it, in one way, shape, or
Mhm.
form or another along the way, right? But it's about bringing it's letting it surface, right?
Mhm.
Letting those seeds germinate in the soil and actually sprout. So that's a simple thought exercise that I often encourage people to do, because it helps kind of break the chains of, well, if I just had the blank, then I
Mhm.
would feel the way I want to feel. But to your point, if you can't feel it now, there's zero guarantees you're going to be able to feel it then. More importantly, that you're going to be able to sustain that feeling then,
Mhm.
right? And it sounds kind of esoteric and ethereal, right? That you should be able to just find peace or stillness or whatever you want to find in any given moment. But I think ultimately that comes from acceptance. When we accept
Mhm.
every individual moment exactly as it is, it gives us the space. It's not to say that we can't say, well, it's good or bad, or I'm comfortable or uncomfortable. It's just accepting it, period. And then that gives us the opportunity to take responsibility for the way that we uh, respond,
Mhm.
right? Whether it be emotionally, intellectually, through our physical actions, etc. So a simple thought exercise, but again, we're trying to dig a little bit deeper here, that deep work. That's why that phrase is in the title of the book, because it is deep. And I define it as work, but my wife hates that word, right? I don't want to think about it as work. And that's totally fine, right? But it's part of my truth.
I love that. Something that I was thinking about when you said you were talking of and explaining the idea of, there might be a problem if you're constantly, like almost obsessively looking for the next thing or the next experience. And it made me think of it as like escapism behavior. I mean, I'm the queen of trying to check out, but the thing that whether it's a book,
Yeah.
whether it's
Yeah.
TV, all these different things. And it's kind of like if I can focus on something in the future, I'm not being as present right now. And I don't know, it's just something that I thought of when you said that was, that's an interesting, for me, that's my experience. I'm not saying everybody has that. I'm just saying for me, that was a profound thing for me to just figure out on live television.
It's a gift that addiction gave me, right?
Yeah.
I mean, as an addict, you're always seeking to escape, and you're always seeking the next high that's going to make you feel the way you want to feel.
Yep.
After 12 years of that and trying, every substance known to man, you're just, it was like intellectual. It's like, okay, it's not here.
Yeah.
What I'm waiting for is not here,
Yeah.
right? And so I need a paradigm shift. I don't just need a different avenue of content or experiences. I need a paradigm shift.
No, that's a wonderful way to put it. I mean, just think about how many people, because I went the rehab route. So I was forced to go to AA meetings, which for everybody who's watching, I'm not trying to put them down. They do work. It just wasn't for me. But the thing that used to drive me bananas was when people would say, I'm a grateful alcoholic. And I'm just like, what's wrong with you? But now I get what they were saying. They were just saying, thank goodness I hit that spot where I finally had to take a look at myself and grow from it.
Yeah.
But at the time I was like, you're insane.
Yeah, similar to you, so I didn't go through like AA or NA or any of those things, but I did go to one meeting one time, and the introduction, I couldn't get through the introductions, right? I'm so-and-so and I'm a blank.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I'm trying to come here to not identify as an addict or an alcoholic, or,
Yep.
That was really challenging for me, but it's an opportunity to reframe and recontextualize, right? And there might be some of your listeners, and you might be familiar with this notion of we change when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of the change itself.
Yes.
And I like that phrase, but I also feel like it kind of makes it one-dimensional, right? Like you have to be in pain in order to change. And I don't necessarily agree with that.
Yeah.
Right? We all have the opportunity to self-actualize in any given moment, at any given time, for any given reason. And to people out there who don't feel like they have a background in substance use addiction, I would encourage them to look at other aspects of their life, right? Like the vast majority of us have addictive and compulsive tendencies, whether it be food or our cell phones or media consumption or whatever it is, right? Like it's whatever flavor you prefer. And if you don't define it as addiction, that's totally fine. But then let's at least call it compulsion. And how do we escape that wheel, right? How do we escape that cycle of compulsiveness? We don't necessarily need to be in pain in order to do that.
Yeah, exactly. I like that. Yeah, because I don't want to have to wait until I get as bad as I was at that one point in my life to make any major changes. It's just I don't need to go that far down the road ever again, hopefully. I mean, I don't intend to. Once was enough in my life. Anyway, we are almost out of time. Tell us the name of your book again.
Soil and Spirit, Seeds of Purpose.
Yes.
Yeah, you can find it right there. And ironically, as I was doing research on my book, I hopped on the internet and I Googled the title. There's a new book coming out in May of this month entitled Soil and Spirit.
No way.
Yeah, no way, right? So that one has a cover. It's like a red cover with a beet. That's not mine. Mine has a white cover and a little Hobbit house, beautiful cover art made by a guy named Greg Euclid.
And it's going to be in the show notes as well as on in the comment section. There was a technical issue. Otherwise, we would show it on the screen right now. I'm like, back to that technology stuff. But anyway, it is all the time that we have. I will be sure to pop that up there as well so that people can find it and know that they're getting your book. Because I know a lot of people tend to just look at the title and not anything else if you're anything like me.
Or buy them both. Buy them both and you'll be sure that you'll get it.
Exactly. There you go. Promotion. Well, Ian, I just want to say thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate you being here. You're an absolute pleasure. And thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your story with us.
Thanks for the opportunity. I really appreciate it, Julian.
Thank you. Everyone, that is all the time that we have for today. We will see you again very soon. Enjoy the rest of your week.